Hi, my name is Brian Goldstein, and I'm the Executive Director of Energy Independence Now, which is the only environmental nonprofit organization that solely focuses on sustainable hydrogen applications, spanning the mobility market, as well as applications like renewable energy storage, deep industrial decarbonization, and disaster resilience. Energy Independence Now, or EIN, helped create the original California Hydrogen Highway Initiative for our then Governor Arnold Schwarzenegger. And we've now spent over 20 years working between government and industry to help facilitate the market for hydrogen fuel cell electric vehicles, or FCEVs, among other hydrogen technologies. We have helped guide the California policy community to invest in hydrogen refueling infrastructure, requirements for renewable hydrogen content and transportation fuel, and investments in renewable hydrogen production projects. We now work globally to help advance the adoption of renewable hydrogen to facilitate the new energy economy. Our organization focuses on three primary programs: advocacy, analysis, and education and outreach. You can find out more about our organization, including our publications and videos about our work, through our website, einow.org, or through our exciting new public service campaign titled DriveH2, which you can find across social media channels using the handle @DriveH2 or online at driveh2.org. So I've been asked to answer a few questions. I'm here today to tell you a little bit about consumer adoption of fuel cell electric vehicles in California and to provide an update about the current state of hydrogen refueling infrastructure here. I'm also going to talk about lessons that we've learned over the last 20 years so that others can learn from our experiences. So let's jump right in. The first question is, how is the consumer adoption journey progressing in California, and what makes fuel cell electric vehicles a compelling choice for consumers? So the consumer adoption journey is progressing really well here in California and has thus far only been limited by the capacity and resilience of the infrastructure. I'll talk a little bit more about that in a few minutes. Automotive OEMs such as Toyota, Honda, and Hyundai are delivering excellent FCEV products that accommodate the demands of California drivers with long ranges, now over 400 miles, very fast refueling, and perhaps most important, the communal refueling experience that drivers are familiar with from legacy vehicles. This last point is especially important here in California because more than half of our population lives in multifamily housing that often lacks dedicated parking spaces or charging infrastructure for battery electric vehicles. The next question is, tell us more about the refueling infrastructure and its dependency on FCEV adoption within California. So currently in California, we have 47 hydrogen refueling stations that are now open and serving FCEV drivers. I'm excited to say that we have about 132 more stations that are in various stages of development as we proceed toward our early goal of 200 hydrogen fueling stations in California. Our new goal is to have 1,000 fueling stations online in California by 2030. So regarding vehicle adoption, we have approximately 11,000 light-duty hydrogen fuel cell electric vehicles on the road in California. And I'm very optimistic about the trajectory of FCEV adoption as we're able to bring more stations and fuel supply online. So the third and final question is a bit of a heavier lift. What are the lessons learned in California from the early stages of the hydrogen mobility movement? There are a lot of them. Equipment integration challenges is the first one that comes to mind. For example, point of sale payment processing, which is relatively new technology because hydrogen has typically been a B2B enterprise. Before we opened our first stations in California, no one had ever tried to use a consumer credit card to buy hydrogen at a fueling station. So we needed to create a system that could not only process consumer payments, but also one that could very accurately measure the amount of hydrogen being dispensed. Another lesson learned is about equipment resilience. Much of the early hydrogen fueling equipment had not previously been used by consumers or in rigorous real-world scenarios, which continues to lead to equipment failures. So one example of this is that consumers sometimes drop the refueling nozzles, which contain sensitive electronics and are somewhat fragile compared to petrol refueling nozzles that we're all used to. Another example of an unexpected equipment issue, this time not necessarily a consumer issue, is that some of the compressors at the station stop operating at high ambient temperatures, which has led to unexpected downtime in some of the hotter locations in California, especially during the summer. Perhaps the biggest or most painful lesson that we've learned is supply chain resilience. In the early days of the FCEV movement, the hydrogen stakeholder community believed that California's substantial legacy hydrogen production capacity for industrial activities like refining would provide ample supply for FCEV refueling. While we do in fact have quite a lot of hydrogen production in California, most of the production facilities were not equipped with merchant hydrogen terminals, meaning that they were unable to fill up the transport trailers that distribute hydrogen to fueling stations. Unfortunately, we have experienced many fuel supply interruptions, which thankfully we now expect to subside as new hydrogen production facilities that are dedicated solely to the fuel cell electric vehicle market come online. Other examples of supply chain resilience include making sure that there are enough storage and transport trailers to adequately supply the fueling network. And don't forget about the truck drivers. We've had a shortage of drivers that are certified and qualified to drive gaseous and liquid hydrogen from the point of production to our hydrogen stations. One last noteworthy lesson is to build stations strategically with future demand in mind. The FCEV market has been so popular in California that some of our early stations, those with a capacity of about 180 kilograms per day, need to be restocked with fuel, oftentimes twice per day, because driver demand for hydrogen has been higher than expected, and the early network has been stressed by higher demand for fuel than we originally anticipated. We have some excellent policy mechanisms in place now that incentivize station developers to build bigger, future-proof stations in order to meet the demand that we anticipate once the network reaches full scale. So I appreciate the opportunity to tell you a little bit about the California Hydrogen Highway Network, and I couldn't be more excited to see the hydrogen movement gaining global momentum so quickly. Please feel free to send more questions to our team, and be sure to check out our digital resources through driveh2.org or across our social media channels at driveh2.